Tell us what you experienced there.
I went there in my capacity as a medical doctor with a background in the field of humanitarian aid, and I also went to gather evidence as to really what's been going on so that I could speak out about it when I came back. And Joe, I was shocked, absolutely shocked. I met people who had seen their husbands murdered and mutilated, who themselves had been gang raped and suffered extreme sexual violence, and who'd had their own babies thrown onto burning fires and had to make the decision about whether they go to retrieve those babies or escape for their lives with the children that they still have.
I mean, is this just ethnic cleansing in your mind?
No, I've been very clear since getting back that I'm calling this a genocide. That means something different when it comes to describing it within humanitarian law, because ethnic cleansing isn't even a crime according to humanitarian law, and quite frankly what I've seen is an atrocity, and it is genocide.
How long were you there for?
I was there for a total of 5 days. It was a very, very packed trip. Probably slept in total for 2 hours during that time and worked in the clinics with an NGO called Med Global. Also went throughout the camps with Christian Aid to see what they were doing and met people fleeing over the border as they arrived.
I mean, the pictures are shocking when you look at them, the camps in Bangladesh, and the country is struggling itself, obviously, to cope. But when you spoke to refugees and survivors, were they expressing any interest in returning to Myanmar?
They were saying that they would only be willing to return to their homeland if they could be guaranteed security. They fled with the clothes on their back. They left everything, and they are frightened to death of going back because they know, as I do, that if they were to be forcibly repatriated, they would be going back to their deaths.
What do you think about the plans to actually try and repatriate Rohingya Muslims into Myanmar?
Well, what we're hearing there actually confirms my fears, which is that if you tell people who've been pushed out that the solution is for them to go back and face their killers and torturers and tormentors, that doesn't feel like any kind of solution at all. There would have to be some radical change in that country for them to feel able to go back to the very place where, as we've just been hearing very, very movingly, families were, burnt to death and raped and brutalised. So this is being built up as some kind of solution, and I'm sure for the people concerned it doesn't sound or feel like that at all.
But is it sustainable for them to stay in Bangladesh, which, as I said, is already struggling?
That Bangladesh has opened its borders and its hearts, but you're absolutely right, 22% of Bangladeshis live below the poverty line. I think a number of things need to happen. Our government are doing a great job of supporting the Bangladeshis with financial resources, but actually we need to make sure that we target Myanmar and we call it out, and that the people who have been responsible for these heinous crimes are taken to the International Criminal Court. I have met with Foreign Office officials who have explained to me how deeply complex it is on the ground. Look, Bangladesh do need support, that is a given, but we cannot, absolutely cannot, send people back to their deaths.
What's been the reception from the Foreign Office and ministers and officials you've spoken to about this mounting pressure that you feel should be put on Myanmar?
I've been met with a variety of responses. I was very disappointed that openly in a debate I asked Boris Johnson to meet with me. He said he was too busy and that I should write to him a letter. I wrote him a letter which he didn't even respond to. I have met with Minister Field, who was helpful, but the Foreign Office officials that I've spoken to are working incredibly hard, but do explain how complex it is on the ground. But quite frankly, our government are not doing enough at this point.
But what could they do? I mean, isn't this part of an international community response, not the British government on its own necessarily?
It does do. I mean, the leverage, I would guess, I'm no expert on this region at all, I would defer to you, but Aung San Suu Kyi does seem to have a very particular relationship and affinity for Britain, and I think the kind of condemnation you're looking for from the British government to her for being the de facto leader of this country, who has not done anything, it seems, to stop this when it was happening, and to put pressure on her. I think Britain does have some leverage here. In most places of the world, it unfortunately has to be admitted that a voice from Britain doesn't have cut that much ice. But I think in this particular case, because of her links to this country, it would mean something. But I hear what you say.
Are you going to go back?
Yes.
When are you going?
I'm currently working out when to go because I want to go back there with an actual objective to meet. So I am working out the correct time, but I do definitely want to go back in the next couple of months because I think it's really, really important that we keep the pressure up. And the British public have a track record of being kind, generous, compassionate, and brave. And I think we need to stand collectively, cross-party on this and call this out for what it is. Because if we are allowing this to happen there, where next in the world? We need to be able to stand up and proudly say, as a British community, that this is wrong.
Rosena Allin-Khan, thank you.
Thank you.